Come in. We have to talk about Howard Rubin real quick.
If you take a little Diddy, you throw in a little Epstein and Maxwell, you get this guy Howard Rubin and what he was involved in.
I'm standing here on 57th Street, across the street from just one of the places where New York financier Howard Rubin has been accused of torturing women for at least a decade. He did so here in a soundproof room filled with electrical shock equipment he called the dungeon.
Which I don't even know. The judge's like, I don't even know if you can consent to
This guy's 70 years old. He's a former Salomon Brothers. This is an ex-Wall Street star.
He would get his assistant, Jennifer Powers, seen here with her DJ husband, disgusting, to go online and find women, many of them desperate and on the verge of homelessness, and promise them cash for agreeing to spend a night in the dungeon. Once they got here, they were given alcohol, and after they were sufficiently inebriated, they would be handed a blank NDA that they had to sign.
But these acts went far beyond what these women signed up for. Apparently there was like a safe word, but the women were gagged so they couldn't say the safe word. It's insane.
Or honestly comments of any kind to anyone mentioned in this video on behalf of me or yourself. The purpose of this video is to give my commentary and opinion on matters of public concern. Thank you.
Howard Rubin is an American former investment banker. He gained prominence on Wall Street in the 1980s as a bond trader at Salomon Brothers, which is now defunct. Actually, maybe Salomon Brothers was sold and it turned into Citibank. That's what it was. At Salomon Brothers, he had contributed to the development of the collateralized mortgage obligation market. And he was profiled in Michael Lewis's 1989 book, Liar's Poker. Howard Rubin later held senior positions at firms including Merrill Lynch, Bear Stearns, which is now defunct from the 2008 financial crisis, and most infamously, the Soros Fund Management. Rubin was born to Leon Rubin and Laura Solomon Rubin. He grew up in Massachusetts as the son of a researcher for Polaroid in Cambridge. Cambridge, Massachusetts is where like MIT and Harvard are over there. Rubin began his Wall Street career in the fall of 1982 as a bond trader at Salomon Brothers, and he did this specifically by studying behavioral patterns in mortgage prepayments. He was featured in that book, Liar's Poker, as a young trader, applying card counting techniques from blackjack to financial securities trading strategies. Card counting techniques. Supposedly, in this book, reportedly, Rubin earned $25 million his first year. And I don't think that's adjusted for inflation. I think that is $1982. So in 1985, he gets married to this woman, Mary Henry. She is a fellow Wall Street professional. They end up having 3 kids along the way, including one daughter that's going to come back around. So put a pin in that. From 2008 to 2015, Rubin served as a portfolio manager at Soros Fund Management, focusing on mortgage-backed securities. He retired for the second time from finance shortly thereafter, and he has lived in Fairfield, Connecticut ever since. Also, he was featured in that movie, remember The Big Short? The 2008 financial crisis movie. He was also kind of depicted or portrayed in that movie as well, a minor character there, and he referenced his trading activities apparently in this movie, or the character that played him, so thought that was interesting. Okay, so that's pretty much a little bit of a background on him. Of course, I could have said more, but that's not the point of the video. In 2017, he got hit with some lawsuits. 6 women. Interestingly, many of these plaintiffs ended up being former PLAYMATEs from an infamous publication by Hugh Hefner. Okay, so some folks from that. In 2017, 6 women, including some Playmates, filed civil lawsuits against Howard Rubin, alleging that he had subjected them to beatings, R-word, non-consensual other activities in exchange for payments. The lawsuits claimed violations of the Ficking Victims Protection Act, and again, this is a civil lawsuit, so they sued him. Before the trial even started, Howard Rubin motioned to get the lawsuit dismissed. He filed a motion for dismissal. He did not think that this lawsuit should go forward. He pretty much argued that these plaintiffs were just disgruntled S-workers who knew what they were signing up for. They signed NDAs, agreeing to the activities, and now they just, too bad, so sad, they just want money or something. That was kind of one of his main arguments. The judge did not agree. The judge did not grant the motion to dismiss. Okay, so here's like a little quote from that denial of the summary judgment. This is the judge actually saying this. The problem with Howard Rubin's argument is its false assumption that there was a meeting of the minds on the notion of what constitutes BDSM. So Howard is saying, no, they agreed to this. And they're saying, no, we didn't. And the judge is saying that's a big part of what we're arguing about here. All parties must agree that whatever consent plaintiffs did give did not extend to them getting unalived. Like, they didn't give consent for him to unalive them, basically the judge is saying. They didn't consent to dismemberment. They didn't consent to third-degree burns or prying off fingernails or disfiguring them. And the judge is like, this is just an example. It is not alleged that Rubin did these things. He's saying, like, but to the extreme, right? There's certain things we can all agree they didn't agree to. They didn't agree that you could unalive them. So the judge is saying it is obviously something less than these acts that Howard Rubin is accused of. And I mean, I don't even want to get into all the specifics of the allegations in the lawsuit, but like, we did go through, beatings and violence and things like that were alleged. The judge said, okay, they didn't say that you unalived him. They said you did something to him. How much did they agree to in these NDAs? This is an issue of fact. This has to go to the jury. The brutality that Howard Rubin had in mind may well have been less than the plaintiffs had wanted to receive or more. There's some evidence both ways. But if there is such a thing as consent to this type of things, which I don't even know, the judge's like, I don't even know if you can consent to him. That was wild for me to see. He said if, or she, I don't know, the judge could have been she, but if there is such a thing as a BDSM consent that the law will enforce, and there may not be, that's wild to me. It's going to have to be a lot more specific about what the perpetrator and the victim have in mind. That's what the judge said. When Howard Rubin tried to get that 2017 lawsuit thrown out, the judge said, no. You're saying they agreed to do certain things, but what? Specifically, they agreed to having a cattle prod, zap, zap, blank, blank, zap. There was cattle prods, there was electrocution involved. They were bound, they were gagged. Some of them were given a safe word, but then they had a gag ball in their mouth and they couldn't say the safe word. Some of them would say the safe word and they would, apparently, allegedly, according to the lawsuits, Howard would not. So it was a useless word for no reason. And the room was like soundproof. You couldn't hear anything out of it. You couldn't hear anything coming into it, any noise from inside or outside. And there was specially made machines. One was called the Cross, had a cage under it. So the judge said you need to be more specific in your NDAs. We're going forward to trial. So the case did go forward to trial. And after a 7-day trial in 2022, a jury found Howard Rubin liable to the plaintiffs and ordered him to pay about $3.85 million total to these plaintiffs. The jury had awarded each plaintiff $500,000 in compensatory damages, $120,000 in punitive damages, and there was this one plaintiff Moore, to whom the jury awarded $500,000 in compensatory damages and then $250,000 in punitive. So she got like $100,000 more. After losing the lawsuit, again, it went to a jury. Howard Rubin immediately asks the judge to undo the jury's verdict. He's like, no, I need a new trial or something. Like this just can't stand. This was a miscarriage of justice. And again, the judge sided against Howard Rubin, saying that he basically ignores the central issue of the case. Again repeating what the judge had already told Howard in that previous attempt to get the case thrown out before it ever went to trial. Here's an excerpt right here. The judge says, however, Howard Rubin only acknowledges in passing what is the central issue in this case. What's the central issue? Well, it's, did the plaintiffs consent to extreme acts of violence as part of their contracts for commercial services? Did they consent to extreme acts of violence, including cattle prods, electrocuting, pool cues, etc.? Coming to New York to participate in consensual acts, even something falling under the general rubric of SM, was not tantamount to declaring open season on these women once they got here. The judge said, as I stated in denying Rubin's summary judgment motion, and then that's the part we just read, the problem is his false assumption, there was some type of meeting of the minds, they didn't agree to getting unalived, etc., etc. The judge said, the examples I gave above did not include what the evidence actually showed, blank with an electric prod and pool cue, for example, but the point is the same. If Howard Rubin wanted to assert consent as a matter of law for conduct like this, meaning if he wanted to say this is a contract and she agreed to it, even if that's legally possible, he probably should have spelled out verbatim exactly what he had in mind. A reference to SM or quote injury, that's too vague. It needed to spell it out verbatim. That might have well have meant something to him, but it might have meant something different. When they saw injury, they might have agreed to a certain thing, but he, that didn't mean you got to unalive them. That didn't mean you got to peel their toenail off or something. The judge is like, there needed to be more specifics. because it's not clear here that they agreed to this. So no, we're going to have to let the jury verdict stand. The judge said, in other words, Howard Rubin certainly gave evidence to show plaintiffs were on notice that he was going to engage in some type of that activity, of the SM or the BD type. But a reasonable jury could very well have concluded that the degree of those activities that they experienced was way more severe, right? Because they call anything. He's doing like grotesque torture and calling it light play or bondage play. And it's like, part of the issue there is it could mean that to him. It doesn't even have to not mean that to him. He could really think that's what that is. But that's why the judge is saying they needed to be way more specific if he thought that he was about to get off because somebody signed an NDA, an agreement, a waiver. The judge said Rubin likely struck the jury the same way he struck me. So this is giving you insight into the judge's perception of Howard Rubin. This is what the judge thinks about him. Someone so wrapped up in his own wealth and base desires that he had little regard for the consequences of his actions or his victims' reactions to them. When he testified, virtually boasted that, quote, I personally derive blank pleasure from inflicting, getting off, but inflicting physical pain and verbal abuse, end quote. One more time. He said on the stand, he testified in this trial, or I don't know, maybe it wasn't on the stand. Excuse me. I believe it was actually in a deposition. But it said testified, so this is a testimony. The judge said, Howard Rubin struck me as somebody so wrapped up in his own wealth and power that he didn't really care about the consequences of his actions. He certainly didn't care about his victims' feelings. This is the judge. He said, Howard Rubin practically boasted in his testimony, quote, I personally derive blank pleasure from inflicting, getting off, but inflicting physical pain and verbal abuse. I like it. Pleasure. He gets pleasure from it, he said. The judge said this was without apology or explanation. It was not egregious. It was not a miscarriage of justice or a seriously erroneous result for the jury to conclude that Howard Rubin wasn't the kind of person who would have much regard for the victim's well-being, even if his testimony was more erudite than theirs. The jury could reasonably believe that, at least when it came to the encounters with his procured women, he was more divorced from reality and societal norms than the plaintiffs were. He's like, it would be easy for a jury to believe, reasonable at least, Howard Rubin was more outside reality. Divorced from reality and societal norms than the plaintiffs were. And these are playmates. So the judge is saying, your sexual proclivities are beyond, sir. There was no miscarriage of justice. These are people who are liberated sexually, obviously, but that doesn't mean that they agreed to cattle prods. And the way that he used these instruments was such that I can't even describe it here. The judge said it would have been perfectly reasonable for a jury to credit these victims' testimony with more credit than they gave Howard Rubin because he was so delulu. The judge said that would have been perfectly reasonable. So it might not come as a surprise to you to know that he appealed. He appealed that as well, and that's working its way through the courts, the appeals court. So again, that was a civil case. Some horrible things were alleged. He said he derived pleasure from certain things and all of that, and he lost. He owes millions to these victims, and now they're appealing it. Okay, so that brings us up to 2025. And just a few months ago in September 26th, 2025, Howard Rubin and his former personal assistant, Jennifer Powers, were indicted in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of New York on 10 federal criminal counts. 10 counts of alleged crimes, innocent until proven guilty, but they include trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. Also, transportation of individuals across state lines for prostitution. Now, this one might sound familiar. It's the Mann Act charges that Sean P. Diddy Puff Daddy Combs, was actually found guilty of. These were the things that he was actually found guilty of. Two counts. Okay, so Howard Rubin is also now being accused of this, except this is in the Eastern District and Diddy was the Southern. Also, in addition to the ST by force, fraud, coercion, which Diddy was also accused of but found not guilty. Also, transportation. So the two of these overlap with the same things Diddy was charged with. But Howard Rubin, a former Soros financier, is also being accused in this criminal indictment of bank fraud. Now, these charges mirror closely the same civil allegations from several of those plaintiffs in that 2017 civil case. We're talking cattle prods, electrocutions, gags, ball, this, that, NDA, flying, playmate, the whole, lot of details are similar. But apparently there's also going to be even more alleged victims in this trial. There's at least up to 10 Jane Does. These are separate individuals from one another. The charges relate to an alleged scheme from 2009 to 2019 in which Howard and Jennifer, so Howard Rubin and his assistant at the time, allegedly recruited dozens of women, often through social media or modeling websites, to travel to New York City for commercial acts involving these bondage and Mark Deshad, remember him, those type of elements. According to the indictment, encounters initially occurred in luxury Manhattan hotels, kind of like the freak-offs, before eventually Howard Rubin would shift to renting a penthouse with a soundproofed dungeon. He had a 2-bedroom penthouse he rented near Central Park. Now, this is not where he lived with his wife. He still married to his wife and he was living with her down the street. But in the second bedroom of this penthouse near Central Park, there was an alleged dungeon with all kinds of apparatuses and instruments, including electrocution devices. Prosecutors allege that Howard Rubin exceeded the scope of what the models had consented to. He ignored the safe words that they had put into place. He continued violent acts even when women were unconscious or injured. He caused lasting physical and psychological harm. Some people even allege they had to have surgeries, allegedly. Howard Rubin was arrested at his Connecticut home and arraigned in Brooklyn in federal court in September. He pleaded not guilty, but a magistrate judge did order that he be detained pending trial, deeming him a flight risk, a danger to the community. He tried to argue that he should be let out. He poses no risk to the community, but the judge said no. So his co-defendant is Jennifer Powers. Now, she was apparently a substitute teacher. She's like a PTA Texas mom and apparently was putting cuffs on the cross for Howard Rubin, allegedly. Innocent until proven guilty. But, again, they did face similar allegations in the civil trial, but Jennifer Powers filed a motion to dismiss and hers got granted.
This house on a cul-de-sac road in Southlake is where the FBI arrested Jennifer Powers, a now former Carroll ISD substitute teacher.
It speaks to what we know to be true, that people who are engaging in this crime tend to be everyday folks.
A federal indictment charges her with sex trafficking, but the details are disturbing. The feds say Jennifer Powers recruited women to have paid sex with financier Howard Rubin, flying them to his New York, quote, penthouse dungeon that she built. There, investigators say he physically and sexually abused one woman so hard her implant flipped, and administering electric shocks to others. They say Jennifer Powers knew about the abuse, told some women to buy bruise cream afterward, had them sign secrecy agreements, and paid them off.
In exchange, the feds allege Rubin financed Powers' lifestyle, including putting money towards a down payment on a home in this Southlake neighborhood and paying for her kids' private school tuition. All of it amounting to millions of dollars.
So while Howard Rubin was held responsible for the civil case, the judge said that there wasn't enough evidence against Jennifer Powers. So we'll see, even though she's charged as a co-defendant here, we will see how it all shakes out. She's accused in the lawsuit, in the indictment rather, of arranging payments, typically $5,000 per session, and she would arrange the non-disclosure agreements, allegedly. These were to silence the victims, allegedly. This is all according to them, not me. I'm just telling y'all what the indictment and superseding indictment says. She would also apparently allegedly structure the transactions to evade reporting all of this to the bank. The operation allegedly, according to the superseding indictment, cost Howard Rubin over $1 million. Now, there's a separate count in the lawsuit that accuses Rubin of bank fraud for misrepresentations used to secure financing for Powers' mortgage in Texas. So the indictment alleges that Howard Rubin covers all the expenses for Jennifer Powers' lifestyle. She's married and Howard Rubin is the one paying the mortgage, according to this indictment. So there is this bank fraud situation where they're actually going to be going after him for the financial crimes. And a lot of the financial crimes alleged, or the instances of it, have to do with Jennifer Powers and how she receives her money from Howard Rubin, how he would send the money, what she would spend it on. He apparently pays the kids' private school's tuition in Texas, the mortgage on the house, the full credit card. The credit card bill goes to Howard Rubin. He pays it, allegedly, according to this indictment. If convicted, Howard Rubin faces a mandatory minimum, 15 years in prison million per count of there's 7. There's 7 force, fraud, coercion counts. So if he even gets one, that's a minimum of 15 years. He was arrested in Connecticut in September, and he's, like I said, he's trying to get out on bail. He hasn't been able to. And then they did pick up Jennifer Powers in Texas. The FBI has established a tip line for victims or anyone with information, potential victims is what it says. So in arguing, to keep him in jail, the feds gave a few reasons why they wanted him to stay in jail, not to get bail. Jennifer Powers was allowed to get out on bail. I think she's on house arrest, maybe because she has the 2 young kids. Howard Rubin tried to get out too, on house arrest and this and that. And no, absolutely not. The judge said no. We'll get into some of the reasons why that judge decided that. The feds argued and the judge agreed that Howard Rubin was a tremendous risk in a lot of ways. First of all, risk to victims' safety. They are apparently afraid. According to the feds, Howard Rubin has tampered with witnesses previously in that 2017 civil trial. And previous allegations exist of bribery, trying to pay people off, threats, I'm going to this, that, and the other, if you sue me or whatever. Also, allegedly, as if it's not bad enough with the cattle prods. I mean, this man just appears, if these things are true, what they're alleging against him, he is evil. I don't know. I wasn't there, innocent until proven guilty, but if this stuff is true, what an evil individual. He needs to be, if anybody needs to be locked up, it's people like this. Apparently, allegedly, he went on the dark web and tried to hire a person to take care of the job, if you know what I mean. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say it. It rhymes with, it starts with an H. You know what I'm talking about, okay? He tried to hire somebody to take care of these people. But apparently, allegedly, he didn't end up going forward with it. I have reason to believe that's because most of those blank on the dark web is probably a scam. There's apparently like a video going around on YouTube about it. Okay. I wouldn't even know how to get on that web. Okay. I want to stay on the light web personally. Anyway, so for that reason, the judge is like, he's a little bit of a risk to victim safety if he already allegedly tried to get a blank to take care of blank. You know what I mean? But not only is he kind of like a risk in that way, he's a risk of the flight risk. The Fed said he has considerable assets overseas and he's lying about them. That's what the feds are alleging. He's like, look, he's under investigation and he's been indicted for bank fraud, among other things. Okay. And he's still apparently allegedly not telling the truth to the feds and the financial powers that be about his assets. Apparently 2 years ago or something, his Cayman Islands offshore account was worth $70 million. But today, whenever he was required to self-report on his assets, he reported that it was worth $35 million. So it's like, where's the 35 extra? Where's the other 40 million or whatever? It's like, well, hold on. 2 years ago, you didn't, what happened in the last 2 years where he lost $35 to $40 million in the Cayman Islands? And the feds are saying, he's just lying, Your Honor. We have no way to know what he's telling the truth about. He's got all his assets hidden to and fro. He's like a finance guy, don't forget. He's a finance guy. And then they're saying that this offshore account is actually something to do with life insurance. And it's called Crown Royal or Crown Global. Crown Global. It's just giving... I'll keep my tinfoil hat off on this episode, but crown of what? Crown of whomst. Anyway, I review. Not of me. I'm the queen over here. Anyway, so because he has these considerable assets, the government says, and because he's not really telling us the truth about it, even though he's being charged with bank fraud and lying about his financial assets, and he's still not telling the truth about his financial assets, and he won't turn over his passport, and he won't even tell the feds where the passport is. They asked him, where's your passport? And he said, oh, I don't know. And he won't say where it is. He won't tell him where it is. And then his lawyer stood up in court and said, oh, yes, Your Honor, he told pretrial services where it is. The judge is like, did he deny at any point someone when the judge said, I can't imagine somebody wouldn't know where their passport is. So that gave the judge pause. He's like, turn your passport over because this contributes to his flight risk. You want me to let him out? We don't even have his passport? No. The feds also argued that since he got sued in 2017, he's been on notice he could get sued, but he has continued criminal behaviors according to the feds. Again, innocent until proven guilty. I don't know if any of this is true. We're gonna have to see in court. Now, one other thing the judge did say, and I thought it to be interesting, was actually in the hearing, and I do have the transcript. This is the transcript from his bail hearing, where his lawyer was trying to let him get out on bail, house arrest, anything. Like, he didn't want to go back to the jail. He was throwing everything at the wall. I'm leaving a lot of stuff out. But in addition to the reasons that I just outlined already, the passport won't get turned over. We don't know how much money he has. He has considerable assets. The victims are scared. Flight risk, this, that, the other. And the prosecutor says, He lives alone in Connecticut. He is estranged from his wife. Our understanding is she had filed for divorce from him during the civil lawsuit. He's not been employed for many years, and he has extraordinary wealth overseas. It would cost him no hardship at all to pick up and flee to a country that does not extradite. I wonder which countries that could possibly be. Well, Howard Rubin and his lawyers, they did pop back and say he has no family anywhere overseas, any country that doesn't extradite this and that. That's hogwash. The judge did not buy it. The judge was like, I think particularly miffed about the passport thing. The judge was like, I can't imagine that somebody wouldn't know where their passport is. The judge said, given the circumstances and the charges that Howard Rubin is facing, there's a presumption that he has to stay detained. There's a presumption of detention. And Howard Rubin had a chance to try and overcome the presumption of detention. He did not overcome the presumption. He is a flight risk. He could go to a country that doesn't extradite. He hasn't even turned over his passport. What about the Cayman Islands account? We don't know how much it is, how much and all of that. No. Nope, you gotta stay in jail. So that's where it's left off. He's in jail, and I can already see we got one of those Mark Agnifilo types, those bulldog defense lawyers that'll just say anything for these degenerated clients. And again, he's innocent until proven guilty. But if he's guilty of even half the stuff that he's accused of in here, I hope they put him away for a long time, because he ain't gonna stop. This is like big money, big power. Nothing's gonna stop this man except putting him in a cage. That's all I really had for this one. In the meantime, facts ain't defamation, neither are opinions, and everybody is innocent until proven guilty. Love you, mean it. Okay, bye.